Welcome to the Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, listen up, liberals. My wife left me. This is Eddington. Welcome to the Blast Zone.
Welcome to the Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Eddington, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, quick bit of housekeeping. Follow us at Blast Zone Pod on Twitter, blastzonepod.bluesky, whatever, on Blue Sky. Email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Leave us ratings, reviews, comments on your podcast platform of choice, please. It helps the show grow and find new listeners.
We thank you very much.
And now, Ian, how are you doing this week?
If you're hearing this, it is now the new year. We have survived 2025. And honestly, that fact alone feels like an accomplishment. Sometimes all you can hope for is to be able to say, here goes one more out-of-date Garfield wall calendar that I get to tear down and throw in the trash. So congrats to us. Congrats to the listeners. And I wish everyone out there a very survivable 2026.
Yeah, we're recording this on the eve of the Epstein files being released potentially. Feels like there's been a lot of distraction the last few days. I wonder why. So who knows what state America and the world is in right now. We might be at war with Venezuela when this comes out. Russia might be at war with the EU, potentially with us on their side. I don't know. It's a crazy time in America and in the world.
It sure is.
But New Year always brings new hope and a chance at something better. As the Counting Crows famously said, a long December. There's not really much reason to believe this year will be better than the last. We can hope, though.
A little message of hope from your buddies at Blast Zone.
Eagle-eared listeners will know. Do eagles have good hearing?
I don't know.
What's like a famously... Oh, bats. Bat-eared listeners will notice that I am missing my usual wintertime rasp.
Oh, yeah? What happened?
I got healthy. So now that I'm saying this, of course, when the next episode comes out, I'll be fully nasal and sore-throated. But for now, I'm actually feeling okay. And a lot of that is because I've been doing the best practices from the time period of the movie we're talking about today and just isolating myself, not because of COVID, but because of depression, I guess. So got that going on.
Well, it has some upside. Are you telling the kids, like, you're not allowed in here without a mask? There's a mandate, didn't you know?
They wear it right below their nose, like just about everyone in this movie. So it's really not worth trying to enforce it in the home.
Doesn't even help.
I do remember having to put masks on them when they were very young to go to the grocery store, go to preschool. My son had to go to preschool when mask mandates were in effect. Try getting a fucking 3-year-old to wear a mask and also keep it covering their mouth and nose at all times and not rip it off in fury.
That sounds totally impossible.
What a strange time that was. I can't say I'm excited to revisit it, but it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting.
But before we get into that, did you happen to watch anything else you wanted to talk about with the listeners?
I sure did. I watched Rian Johnson's latest Knives Out mystery movie. It's called Wake Up Dead Man, and it's pretty good. You watch one of Johnson's old-timey murder mysteries, and you know you're going to get a big cast, chock full of big fun characters. And in this case, it's set in a Catholic church, and the protagonists are 2 priests, plus the members of their small congregation. And honestly, I don't think this group of people tops the original Knives Out for great characters, but a bunch of good actors in there. I particularly like Josh O'Connor, Glenn Close, Josh Brolin, Andrew Scott, just to name a few of them.
Oh, our gal Kaylee Spaney is in there too.
Kaylee Spaney's in there. Unfortunately, as much as I like her, she didn't have a lot to do. She was pretty thin as this group of characters went. And with all these characters and a big complex mystery plot, it takes 2.5 hours to play it all out on the screen. And I was like starting to worry it wasn't going to be worth all the effort. But just about the 90-minute mark where my patience started to wear thin, the action finally picked up and it did carry me through. And then the finale, beyond just being a satisfying unraveling of a big old mystery, it was actually pretty emotionally moving. I was going to give it a lukewarm review and I was wondering, should I skip it altogether and not bring it? But when it was over, I felt like the movie had redeemed itself and I felt pretty good about it overall. So kind of like Josh O'Connor's father, Judd, you just need to have a little faith and Wake Up Dead Man might turn out all right.
I have to admit that I've almost put this movie on several times and it's the running time that stops me in my tracks. Every time I go to hit play, I'm just like, 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever. And like the movie I'm going to talk about, I had the same problem, but I pushed through it and I just haven't been able to push myself past it for Wake Up Dead Man yet. But I do think I have a bit of a complicated relationship with the Knives Out movies.
Okay.
Like, much like I was going to say much like I feel about James Cameron and Avatar, but it's really not like that because I don't like those movies.
Okay.
But I also lament the fact that James Cameron has spent 35 years of his career, when it's all said and done, on these movies that I don't care about, when he's truly one of our... And he had a big interview this week where he said basically, mind your fucking business. I'll do what I want with my time.
Oh, yikes.
He wasn't talking to me specifically, but to everyone who has this kind of complaint. But also, as much as I like these movies, I feel like they're a bit lightweight. And I think Rian Johnson could do more. I'd almost like him to do like a Knives Out, something else. And he kind of did that with Poker Face, but that wasn't the same to me as a Rian Johnson film. So I'd almost like him to alternate between Knives Out movies and something more original now, because this is an established franchise at this point. At the same time, I'm sure Netflix is paying him quite a lot of money to make these and make them on a pretty tight schedule. So I understand he's got commercial concerns to tend to as well. But I don't know. Do you understand where I'm coming from with that?
Yeah, I totally do. And I heard him talk about the movie, and I do feel like, whereas like the original one was just him doing something neo-traditionalist, right? He was reviving an old-timey Agatha Christie thing that he just loved. And it was made very lovingly, and so it was very fun for that reason. And now I think, especially with the second two, they have more thematic content. They seem to be saying something a little more, and he's obviously exploring his relationship to faith and his thoughts on the stuff that goes on in this movie. And so I think he might feel like he's exploring deeper stuff to him, but because he's doing it in the context of these popcorn movies, these very sort of big cast, star-studded, blockbustery style movies, it may be watering down both halves, and neither half of it feels very satisfying.
Yeah, I think the plan is to do another one of these pretty quickly.
Okay.
But I don't know what his plans are after that, so we'll see. But I hinted at it. I watched a long movie myself.
Okay.
For Show and Tell this week. And it's a movie from one of your guys, one of my favorite directors too, but really somebody, when I hear his name, I'm like, that's Ian's guy. And that's Mr. Edgar Wright, who we've covered twice on this podcast already.
I do love an Edgar Wright movie.
And I watched his 2025 remake of The Running Man, starring Glenn Powell, an actor who I think I like. He's got a big personality, but also like a blandness to him. And maybe it's the roles he's picking, but he plays the titular running man in this movie. That's his name.
Okay.
First name running, last name man. He's running all about. No, this is, of course, adapted from an old Richard Bachman novel, which is Stephen King, as we now know, was made into an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie in the 80s, which was apparently not very faithful to the book, a book I've never read. This one is apparently more faithful. And aside from grappling with the logistics of making a 9-figure anti-capitalist statement, which is, interestingly enough, something we're going to have to grapple with a lot this month, I thought the movie was entertaining, well acted, poorly paced. It starts off really compellingly as you're getting to know this guy. Hold on, let me find his name. Ben Richards, the most generic ass name you could think of. He's kind of in dire straits. He keeps getting fired from his jobs for being an advocate for workers' rights, trying to get better working conditions for himself and his coworkers, better pay, more job security. Basically, he keeps getting fired for trying to unionize.
Okay.
And he's got a sick kid, and it's a near distant future where it's even worse for the lower class than it is right now in America, if you can imagine that.
Hard to picture, but yeah.
Yeah. He's got to get some money to get some meds for his kid who's got the flu, but the flu can kill you now because nobody has health insurance. He goes to try out for a variety of game shows. That's how people make money, basically. You go on these game shows where you're humiliated and beaten. But the biggest prize, of course, where I think you can make $1 billion if you win, is The Running Man. They immediately peg him as a candidate for that. He resists at first. Josh Brolin's really good as the slimy TV producer, it will be no spoiler to say the villain of the movie. But the movie's chock full of great actors and really fun performances. You got Coleman Domingo as Bobby Thompson, who's the host of The Running Man, just doing Coleman Domingo things, very flashy, whip smart guy, but knows how to get a rise out of Richards to get the audience against him, get people tuning in to hopefully see him get murdered. Michael Cera is great as that kind of guy in every big budget action movie who's like the tech guy who can help the star get away from the prying eyes for a little bit. I really do like where his career has gone. He's really charming in this. William H. Macy's got a small but very effective role, just like he did in Train Dreams. A very different movie.
That's right. He popped up again.
And one of our faves, Amelia Jones from Task, pops up pretty late into the movie, but becomes a key player in it.
Oh, neat.
I know I waxed poetic about young Clancy Brown last week, but I wanted to also shout out middle-aged Lee Pace, who we get a lot of in this movie, because just another strikingly handsome dude.
Cool.
With just a lot of sexual charisma, even though he's kind of muted it in this movie to a degree. But yeah, it starts off, the first hour, I would say, is really fun, and I had super high hopes. It is missing some of that Edgar Wright juice, though. It's a little neutered. It's a little paint by numbers, especially as the movie goes on. I think 5 years ago, it was rare to see an action movie with such a strong anti-capitalist bent to it, but it's become old hat by now. It's been a recurring theme in the movies the last couple of years, and I mean, that reflects our reality, but people are fed up with the way things are going, so it's just not as novel of an approach as it used to be. So it loses out on something due to that, but overall, if you like Edgar Wright, if you like Glenn Powell, it's worth your time.
I'm very curious to see it. it and see if I can detect Edgar Wright's signature style. Because we talked about it when we did Last Night in Soho, how he had matured, and after the Cornetto trilogy, he had moved on from his extremely frenetic, zany stuff. And obviously, Last Night in Soho had a more sober, dark tone.
Well, Scott Pilgrim was pretty zany.
Yes. No, Scott Pilgrim fits it in that early category. I think he's trying to find a new footing for the current portion of his career. So yeah, I'm eager to take it apart and see if I can make sense of what he's choosing to do differently and still leave his stylistic imprint on a film.
I mean, it would feel weird if he was still making movies in the tone of the Cornetto trilogy. Those feel like firmly 20-something guy type movies,
Yes,
you know? Like,
I agree.
And he's well into middle age by now. So I think he is definitely maturing. But this feels more like a hired hand project than him maturing. Last Night in Soho felt like a passion project where he had to kind of change his own style to suit the movie's needs. This almost feels like he was noted into taking away his signature style. I don't know if that's true. I have no insider knowledge of that. But like a movie like this could use some zaniness. And there is some, to be fair. It's not a dead serious movie at all. But I don't know. It's missing a little bit of something that I've come to expect from him.
Interesting. Looking forward to checking it out.
Speaking of missing a little bit of something we've come to expect from a filmmaker, I didn't think we were going to get people's heads exploding in Eddington. So I was a little disappointed for the first 2/3 of the movie.
You got to wait for it.
Let me hear about your Eddington experience, because bad-eared listeners will remember that I did bring this to show and tell after I saw it in theaters, and I was pretty coy about what actually goes on in it because I had a feeling we'd be talking about it at some point. But I was effusive in my praise, I believe, and I probably still will be. But what was your exposure to the movie? Did you wait to watch it till we were going to cover it, or did you watch it outside of the show?
No, I pretty much waited. And I was trying to think back what happened in between, because I remember when I first heard about it, when it was still in the works, and I'm like, oh, Ari Aster and some cool actors that I really enjoy. I was like, I'm stoked for this. This sounds exciting. And somehow by the time it came out, some of my enthusiasm had drained away. And that's no shade on you selling it at show and tell, but maybe the grimness of it, the difficulty of going back to COVID days, which is a real thing that we'll talk about, or the controversy about its message. A lot of people had trouble making sense of.
We'll have to grapple with that too, yeah.
Of his point of view. But so all that kind of worked to my advantage because I came to it now, finally, having left all that behind. But I was kind of cool and ambivalent about it, turning it on. And it is a little bit challenging movie to get on its level and to really enjoy what it's doing. But I eventually did. And now I really love it.
Yeah, I really do love this movie quite a bit. Of course, we'll talk about the myriad reasons why, but I want to talk to you about Aster a little bit more because I couldn't remember. Was this your first Aster movie? I know like you've absorbed a lot of him from podcasts or the trades or whatever and know what he's about, but you're also famously a bit of a scaredy cat. And
I am a scaredy cat.
Most of his movies pretty scary.
So yeah, I've dodged some of them for being too scary or weird.
Beau's Afraid is the weird one for sure.
Yeah, Beau's Afraid. I started that one and just was like, I can't handle this. I'm already feeling too anxious.
I've read it described as like watching somebody have an anxiety attack while you have one also.
And then Hereditary was just like everybody is fucking freaked out about that movie. So I'm like, I can't see that. That was one that I read the extended synopsis of so that I would be able to absorb what the movie was without having to watch those scary scenes. But Midsommar, I somehow braved and I really enjoyed. It was one that was like, It was a mindfuck. It was intense, but it was the one that let me go, I don't have to be as afraid as I am in a knee-jerk way of him or his movies, and I can appreciate what he's doing in them.
Yeah, Midsommar was a trailer that I was just like obsessed with. I remember seeing the trailer for the first time in theaters, and I was just obsessed with it. And I went home from seeing the Midsommar trailer, and I found the script online. I read that. I was like very excited for it to come out, and then I didn't even see it in theaters. I missed it somehow. By the time it came out, my enthusiasm had dulled. But yeah, Hereditary really fucked me up. I went into it without knowing much, except it was a highly acclaimed horror movie. And boy, oh boy, it also kind of shattered my faith in the Oscars as like a legitimate enterprise because Toni Collette wasn't even nominated. And that's nonsense because that is one of the rawest, best performances in a movie.
Really?
I can think of now. Yeah, so good. She's so good in that movie. It makes it worth it. And I will say, I think now Blastober has hardened you to the point where you could probably handle it.
Okay, yeah, I probably could.
We came very close to covering Beau's Afraid last year and swapped it out for Napoleon at the last minute. So yeah, we dodged that one too. I also have not seen Beau's Afraid yet. Joaquin, not in a great streak right now. Creatively, sure. Artistically, sure. But commercially, not so much.
Yeah, he's hit a rough patch, but hopefully he's still getting his quote or whatever they say in the industry.
I don't know if that's a thing anymore. Maybe like Clooney and Pitt still get it, but I think Phoenix is bringing in like $3 million a movie these days, probably.
I would take it. No, he's doing great work. And we got to, like you said, we got to sub 1 for 1 Joaquin movies. So we're still equally prepared for this movie. And he's the absolute star of it.
We also did Joker, Folie à Deux last year.
Oh yeah, we snuck that one in too.
2 Phoenix movies. And he's in the center of all these movies. He's very much the focal point. He's not part of an ensemble. He doesn't really do that anymore. His movies tend to be about his character. I guess he's reached that point in his career, but wonder how he would do in like a We Own the Night type ensemble these days.
As long as he's committed, but he has those issues. Didn't he do a last minute bailout of a movie where he lost confidence and wrecked the production?
Yeah, and it was a movie from, was it Todd Haynes? Yeah, it was Todd Haynes, who makes very provocative, very controversial type movies. He was making a gay romance with Joaquin Phoenix that was apparently supposed to be quite explicit. There's been some very opaque comments about what the breakdown was between the two of them and why Phoenix walked off set, but we'll never really know.
Right.
And him being attached to the movie was the only reason it got financing, so the financing fell through when he walked off and the movie just got scrapped, which is really unfortunate. But again, we don't know the specifics of what really went down.
Thankfully for him, he's a good enough actor that directors will still want to work with him.
Clearly. And he tends to work with people repeatedly. If he finds a director he likes,
yeah,
he goes back to the PTA. Now Ari Aster, Ridley Scott, Todd Phillips. Once they work with him, they want to keep working with him. It's hard to say that forget the whole Casey Affleck saga where they were both acting like fucking maniacs for a couple years making that weird movie. But he doesn't seem like he's a tough person to work with because that does catch up to you after a while.
No, I watched a little thing with him and Pedro Pascal and Ari Aster just breaking down one of the scenes in the movie. And there was so much love between the three of them. It was a very positive feeling I got from that.
Yeah, let's talk about Pascal, but I really like him in this movie. It's an interesting performance, but should we get into the making of this?
I'm very curious. This movie is so topical. I'm really curious to hear how it came about.
Oh, a little tidbit that I remembered when you were talking about, and I'm pretty sure this is the same movie, but I believe when this movie was being buzzed about, it was called Disappointment Boulevard. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, I maybe didn't go back that far with it.
I think before it was even like a COVID movie, I remember hearing about this Western that Ari Aster really wanted to make called Disappointment Boulevard. And I think that ended up becoming this. Great name, but maybe Eddington is a little more appropriate for the subject matter.
Let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. When Eddington arrived in theaters on July 18th, 2025, it came with a mix of heightened expectations and dread. This was not just Ari Aster's fourth feature, but it was a movie he had been wanting to make for over a decade. A contemporary Western updated to take place during the COVID era, with major stars attached and a relatively robust $25 million budget. The result was a film that divided critics and audiences, with it receiving 69% on Rotten Tomatoes and earning just over $13 million theatrically, making it Aster's second high-profile Joaquin Phoenix starring bomb in a row.
If you thought Bo was afraid, wait till you meet his accountant.
Aster's career arc makes the reception especially striking. His debut, Hereditary, redefined modern studio horror, turning a $10 million budget into a $90 million global phenomenon whose influence is still being fully grappled with. Midsommar followed with a quieter but still impressive run and built a dedicated cult audience after its theatrical release.
It's the kind of cult you don't want to spend your vacation with.
His third feature and first collab with Phoenix, Bo is Afraid, marked a turning point. The film was intentionally off-putting and difficult, becoming his first commercial failure, and Eddington represents the continuation of that pivot away from accessible genre filmmaking and towards something more alienating by design. The script began life years earlier as a Western Aster once considered making before Hereditary. While promoting Bo is Afraid, Aster confirmed that the Western was back, now retooled to reflect pandemic paranoia, institutional breakdown, and a culture spiraling inward on itself. The film that emerged has lots of Western elements to be sure, but is also equal parts conspiracy thriller, family drama, and pitch black comedy. Casting came together gradually. Emma Stone and Christopher Abbott were first attached in early 2023, with Joaquin Phoenix already planned as a collaborator. By March of 2024, the ensemble had expanded to include Austin Butler, Pedro Pascal, Luke Grimes, Deirdre O'Connell, Michael Ward, and Clifton Collins Jr., with Butler stepping into Abbott's role due to scheduling conflicts. Aster reunited with Phoenix despite the reception of Bo is Afraid, a decision that doubled down on their shared creative instinct rather than retreating to a safer ground. Filming lasted 2 months from March to May of 2024 and took place in the ominously named Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. And that's where Cactus Jack is from.
Hey, that's a Bang Bang reference.
Visually, Eddington marks a major departure for Aster. For the first time, he did not work with cinematographer Pavel Pogorzelski. Instead, Darius Kanji handled photography, bringing a colder, more observational texture to the film. Kanji's work emphasizes distance, isolation, and surveillance, rather than dread or shock, reinforcing the film's thematic concerns. Critics were divided, but not dismissive. John Waters named Eddington his #1 film of 2025, praising its refusal to comfort the audience. General audiences, however, were less enthusiastic. The film opened in 7th place with $4.4 million, surrounded by franchise juggernauts and family films. Its second weekend drop of 63% effectively ended any hopes of a recovery.
Vaxxed.
By its third week, it was barely registering at the box office and was quietly being pulled from theaters. Eddington is not a film that failed because it was misunderstood. It's a film that understood exactly what it was doing and accepted the consequences.
That's the truth.
Aster has already already suggested he's considering a sequel, though he's also thrown around a return to horror or a sci-fi film as his next move. Whatever he chooses, Eddington stands as a clear statement of intent. This is a filmmaker no longer interested in meeting audiences halfway.
I think you described the film very accurately there, but my fear is that if you haven't seen it and you're hearing us talk about it like this, it's not a super off-putting film.
No.
It's not a film that's meant to piss you off. It does make you uncomfortable in a number of places, but I think you also summarized it really well when you said that amongst the other things this movie is, it's a black comedy and it's pretty funny.
It's very funny.
Once you figure out where it's okay to laugh, and like, as always, a second watch does wonders for finding the comedy in a movie like this. And there's a lot, and it's pretty funny and it's pretty sick given the rest of the story that it's couched in.
Yeah, there are some sequences, throwaway lines in this movie that rank up there with some of my favorite comedy lines in years. And I also think we're in a unique position to accept the humor in this film because a lot of it is poking fun at leftists. And we'll have to talk about how the movie paints leftists versus the conservatives and the kind of argument that it's a both sidesy type of movie. As we get into the storyline, we can talk about those things more in depth. But like, we come from late 10s, early 20s Twitter, which was the breeding ground for a lot of the ideology that these teenage leftist characters in the movie are spouting. I think we're uniquely positioned to appreciate it and see it for what it is, which is, I think, a relatively good-natured ribbing most of the time, but it does veer into darker territory by the end.
Yeah, the young people take the most obvious ribbing. So if you're going into this movie worried about its politics or wanting to like police it to see if it's making the right statement, and then you see how much they get off these really hilarious lines that are lampooning these kids who have over-enthusiastically embraced these social justice concepts and spit them back out with a kind of humorous fervor. Those are really funny, but if you're not comfortable with that being laughed at because it might be coming from the wrong spirit, that I can see where that tripped a lot of people up. And then they're like, oh, they're taking both sides too much, or they're making too much fun of the side that's correct. And we'll get to it, but we're pretty confident in hearing Ari Aster talk about these things, that he is not divided. He is not a centrist on these issues. He's very clear where he stands.
Yeah, and I think his statement on it is pretty definitive. So I'll bring it up when it becomes thematically appropriate to bring it up. I have it in the notes to quote it directly, so I'm not misremembering anything. But I just wanted to shout out the line, "I am here to be silent and listen, which I will do right after I finish this speech, which I have no right to give." Maybe my favorite line from the movie.
It's great. And the way that actor shouts that line, sort of screams it out in agony, it's really funny.
Also, Pedro Pascal's character, low-key, has some of the funniest moments too.
Yeah, he has some great ones. And so there's that danger of getting stuck in the movie and thinking that it's just a movie about politics and having to figure out which sides it's taking and is it skewering the people that I wanted to. But I came in thinking still, because it's Ari Aster, like, okay, this should still essentially be a horror movie, or should be at least at its core driven by the things that made him a horror filmmaker and a genre filmmaker overall. And I think that's a perfectly good way to come in. And so that kind of saved me from worrying about its politics too much on its first watch when I couldn't sort them out as clearly as I did later. Like, I would defend people like Aster and people like Zach Cregger's and other filmmakers that the horror genre itself, it doesn't promise you that much. It just says, I'm going to give you fear, death, thrills, revulsion. And that's kind of like all I promise. Anything else that I offer to you as a horror movie is a bonus. And so personally, I don't ask too much of the thematic stuff that's sort of an added layer to this. And I'm like, I hope this is going to turn into a horror movie, because you don't really know. And then by the end of this movie, I was like, yeah, if I just came to this to get those thrills and fear and death and horrifying situations, the movie delivers on that too. So if that's all you really want from it, I think it can be satisfying as just a genre movie.
Interestingly enough, I think he did a lot to change that perception of horror as a film genre that doesn't challenge you or doesn't necessarily approach social issues in any meaningful way. And I don't think that horror movies never had that angle to them. I think the 70s had lots of very topical, very interesting ideas that were broadcast through horror movies. Rosemary's Baby is a great example. Then I think we hit a low point in the early aughts. The late 90s and early 2000s was just like a very awash with toxic masculinity era. And we ended up getting Saws and Hostels and the torture porn genre, as they say. But then Ari Aster and like Jordan Peele and even Zach Cregger now, I think they are not necessarily riding the wave of the monster is trauma, which everyone was doing for a little while. That feels like a byproduct of what they are doing, which is like actually tying in important social issues into horror. Obviously, Peele is probably the most obvious example with his films, but I think Aster does a good job of it.
Yeah, I'd almost say it's flipped in that formula. Instead of the monster is trauma, in this, the monster is very traditional. And I love some of the traditional aspects aspects of it. It's basically, what if a man is driven insane and does unspeakable things and brings the wrath of the world down on his head? And then it goes, oh, and by the way, that can happen in the midst of a very complex contemporary social and political environment too. So it tells you that, hey, horror still can grab you by the balls. You might be very occupied with what's going on in your Twitter feed and how politics and the news of the day is going. But guess what? Life is full of horror, and it can jump up and turn everything upside down at any time. So I like that about it. And I think that's one of the things that horror offers us in our world, where you and I personally can get too news obsessed and anxious and depressed over all those things. It's like sometimes a horror movie is fun to just shake you out of that and go, actually worry about a vampire biting your neck instead of your news feed.
No, he's actually driven insane largely by the internet, which is a cautionary tale in and of itself.
The internet is a huge character in this. We'll have to talk about that.
There are a lot of insane people in this movie that are that way because of the internet. Maybe not a lot of them. It's not a huge cast, but certainly more than Joaquin Phoenix's Sheriff Joe Cross. Should we start getting into the story so we can talk a little more in depth about some of these ideas?
I'm excited to do this. Here we go. It's May of 2020, and the small town of Eddington, New Mexico is beginning to feel beset on all sides. A proposed data center on the outskirts of town promises economic revitalization, but it'll likely place extreme demands on water and power. A mentally ill vagrant named Lodge, played by Clifton Collins Jr., roams the streets of Eddington, coughing and muttering and menacing residents. And looming over the town, as they do over the entire country, are the specter of police brutality, racial injustice, and the imminent threat of the COVID-19 virus. Eddington's conservative-coded Sheriff Joe Cross, played by Joaquin Phoenix, is at odds with the town's progressive mayor, Ted Garcia, played by Pedro Pascal. And their rift has heated up since Mayor Ted is a strong proponent of the COVID mask mandate, while Sheriff Joe hates masking, and he sides with some like-minded townspeople who want to buck the rules. After a heated public confrontation with the mayor, the sheriff decides, on an angry impulse, to run against Ted in the upcoming mayoral election. He recruits his two deputies, Guy and Michael, to help run his campaign, and he immediately decorates his police cruiser in gaudy campaign signs and slogans. But when Joe gets home, his sullen and detached wife, Louise, played by Emma Stone, is furious at Joe for running, fearing that an unpleasant accusation surrounding her past with Ted Garcia will resurface. And the fact that Louise's conspiracy theory junkie mom, Dawn, lives with them doesn't help their relationship. Joe makes an effort at peace with his wife by cooking a special dinner, only to find that Dawn, played by Deirdre O'Connell, has taken Louise to Albuquerque to attend a rally by charismatic cult leader Vernon Jefferson Peake. When they get back home, it's late, and Vernon, played by Austin Butler, is with them. Vernon recounts how he restored his own memories of the sexual abuse he suffered as a child, and Louise seems especially sympathetic. Later in bed, Joe asks Louise whether she was once abused by her dad or maybe by Ted Garcia, but Louise stays silent and does not respond.
That was a real rural juror-ass sentence. Conspiracy theory junkie mom Dawn. Mom Dawn.
That's her. That's how she's fully credited if you check IMDb.
That's right. So the first face we see is apparently Clifton Collins Jr. I did not recognize him. He's usually a very suave, handsome Hispanic man. Here he is of indecipherable ethnicity because he is just sunburnt from being in the New Mexican sun all day with a wild beard and mane.
Yeah.
But he is quite captivating in a fucked up way as Lodge.
Absolutely. I love this character.
I don't know that we've had such like an honest and raw portrayal of unchecked mental illness on screen in a long time. Like, you're tense every time he's on screen because he does feel like a genuine wild card in the way that if you've ever been on like the subway with a guy who's like in that mold, you're just kind of like what's going to happen?
There's something special about his performance and the writing, I assume, too. He mutters a lot of indecipherable stuff, and so it's hard to know how much that was written syllable for syllable in the script. But the performance, there's something special about it because, as you can imagine, if you haven't seen this, when you talk about that kind of character, unfortunate guy who talks to himself and maybe shouts to himself on the street, that's like a tricky stereotype, right? Like, you got to tread carefully as not to portray that in an insensitive way. And this character is larger than life. I mean, he's a big version of that guy, but it doesn't feel insensitive. It feels very authentic. And maybe it's because Clifton Collins goes through so much genuine emotion. You know, it's a character who's talking himself through these manic fits and then angry rants and then crying, and it all just feels real. And so it's a wonderfully compelling character.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain in his performance, and it really shines through. And I wouldn't say the movie's lighthearted in the beginning, but the problems feel small in comparison to what it eventually becomes. But he's always there as like a specter, and he feels like a harbinger of something worse to come because of just how he's really going through it all.
He absolutely is. I'm kind of obsessed with this character in a movie that's full of some really good characters. It feels theatrical because he introduces the film by walking into town. That's very much like an old Western plot or even like Shakespearean. It's this outsider wandering into town. He's setting the scene, but unlike in Shakespeare, he's not actually speaking to the audience and telling you the tale because his words are indecipherable. You can't quite make sense, but they all do feel a little bit thematic. So you feel like you're learning something in his ramblings, but you can't quite tell what.
Even more so in his final scene with Sheriff Joe.
Yes. It feels like they're having a conversation, but only through emotion and words that are sort of broad paintbrush strokes towards what he's suffering with internally.
It's like two people having a conversation, but they don't speak the same language. So they're just trying to get their point across with emotions and gestures and things like that.
Yeah.
But something's always lost. It's really interesting. It's really good.
It's super good. And it helps to me because the movie is so topical, and we'll start to get to those parts of the story. Just watching people argue over whether you have to wear a mask in a grocery store and why, it's tough to take for us who recently lived through this era and is still like a source of anxiety. And so it's very topical. And yet there's this character that feels like a very old timey archetype. So I like that it brings some of each to the movie, that it's not just about social media and screens and current events, but it also has this very traditional structure in it.
Yeah. And I think it's important that he doesn't start the movie in the town as the local town crazy or whatever. He's walking into Eddington when the movie begins, and Sheriff Joe has all these lines about how those are problems, but they're not problems here. Those are other people's problems across the country or whatever. But then he literally has this kind of dark passenger entering his town. It really is, it's great foreshadowing by Aster, and like really builds upon not only Sheriff Joe's, but this kind of conservative idea about like all we have to do is keep the outsiders out and we'll be fine. But like someone can always sneak in or just walk right in.
I mean, he's almost like the Mask of the Red Death in that sense. Like it's this character who, and he literally does, we'll talk about where and when it happens, but he gives Sheriff Joe COVID in his first big interactions. In that the progression of his COVID follows the progression or the regression of the rest of his life as it crumbles around him.
Speaking of Sheriff Joe, you can't hear the words Sheriff Joe without, unfortunately, being reminded of Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Oh my God, I wish I wouldn't be reminded of that guy, but yeah.
From Springfield, Massachusetts, even though he, of course, was the sheriff of a southwestern town somewhere in Arizona. Yeah, Maricopa County, Arizona. Wore a fuck-ass hat, much like the Sheriff Joe in this movie. I don't think any of this is by accident. I think he's drawing upon like this guy who was a conservative hero, but is pretty clearly an idiot. And that's our Joe. That's Joaquin as Sheriff Joe as well. But in these early scenes, I couldn't shake this feeling of sympathy for him. He seems like a flawed but genuinely decent guy who's just constantly bumping up against the upper levels of his own intelligence and doesn't really know what to do about it.
Yeah, like he argues with the mayor who plays the left-leaning intellectual archetype in this. And Joe can't really explain in a very articulate way why he shouldn't have to wear a mask, except for some cheap arguments like COVID's not here right now and I can't breathe. But it's definitely a clash of intellectualism versus feeling. And Joe represents the feeling half. He's just like, it hurts my feelings to be asked to wear a mask, to not have understanding from my community when I tell them that it's hard for me because I have asthma. And so he is somewhat sympathetic. His love for the town seems genuine, even though he's very flawed. And his love for his wife is very clearly genuine. Like in those scenes where he's pleading with her, it's real. So there's a lot to be sympathetic with Joe about.
I really like what you said about how he can't quite articulate why he's upset. But like when he goes to the grocery store and they're just like, you got to wear a mask. He's like, no, it's fine. And they're like, it's not fine. But it's almost like he wanted authority so he wouldn't have to find the words. Like he became a sheriff so he could just give himself an out and be like, no, I'm on police business. I don't need a mask.
That whole scene and reaction it's both really triggering for me, but it's also so real. Joaquin Phoenix acts that set of half-formed thoughts and emotions so perfectly. It was both a really fun scene because it's so well done, but also, man, I get tensed up even on the second watch of that feeling of a bunch of people in a grocery store watching a fight between a guy who doesn't want to put on his mask and some store people who want to kick him out. That's tense for me.
Also, it almost goes without saying because Joaquin Phoenix is the star, but like there is not a single actor in this cast that is not just acting their ass off. I don't think there's a single bad performance in the entire movie.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way to making these very difficult things that we're exploring digestible.
Absolutely. And that makes me want to caveat what I said about Ari Aster just making a genre movie here. It totally works as a serious movie about politics and people in a small town and family and relationships. Like all that stuff is done at the highest level. So he's as good as you need to be as a filmmaker to tackle those aspects of the film.
So what'd you make of Pedro Pascal as Mayor Ted? I feel like he's had a bit of an overexposure thing right now, but going all the way back to Narcos and Game of Thrones, I've been a Pedro Pascal lover. And I think this kind of rekindled something in me because he's played an asshole. And I feel like he hasn't done that in a long time. And it really helps to flesh him out as an actor and give him all his dimensions back.
He's very dimensional in this. He's like, I'm sympathetic to his politics, but then when sometimes it seems a little bit cynical because he's talking about doing the right things for the people and public health and the economy, but he's also clearly guilty of what he's accused of as being in the pocket of this big money data center that's trying to get approval outside of town.
Or more accurately, I guess, being in the pocket of the governor who's in the pocket of this data center, and she's making him promises that he'll be up for her job if he gets it built.
But so there's that guy who's his close advisor.
Just like chief of staff maybe or something. Yeah.
Yeah, he seems to be really pulling the strings, and he's the one telling him how to do everything and get the plant built. So that definitely seems like there's a power broker that he's chosen to let himself be manipulated by. And he's just, it's not big. It's not a flashy character. It's not a character that has to like be larger than life. He's just very real. And so it's a great fit in this movie.
Yeah, he seems like a kind of shitty dad. He seems like kind of an asshole. He's probably not over his wife leaving based on how he reacts when his son reminds him that it's actually his wife's birthday. She walked out on him, and we don't get more backstory about it, but we do get my favorite shot in the movie, which is his campaign video where he walks into his own house and it's empty. And you just see this very obviously fake look of like shock and sadness on his face. And then he's like playing the piano in the desert at some point. And Sheriff Joe's also confused because there's like a lot of black people in the campaign video. He's like, none of these people live in Eddington. Is he busting them in? The campaign video that's like overtly funny. There's other stuff that's a little more subtly humorous, but that is a hilarious sequence.
Yeah, that really does poke a hole in his wholesomeness that like, yes, he's really suffered these things in his family life, but the fact that he's using his wife, leaving him as like a calculated, dramatized ploy to gain sympathy in his political candidacy does seem pretty cheap when you think about it.
What are you to do but go play the piano in the desert? You're having big feelings, you know? Yeah, we'll talk more a little bit about him in the second act. And I do feel like we'll have to check in with Joe every act because he does go through a lot of change.
He goes through a lot.
He goes through a lot and he goes through a lot of changes. But Emma Stone is Louise. This is a very different role from her than we've seen in these big, very showy Yorgos roles she's been doing lately, where she's usually giving very stylized performances or big monologues, or she's these very type A characters. And here she's playing so mousy. And there's some hints maybe that she also had a drug problem in her past. Did you pick up on that?
She had some other problem.
I can't have stress or I'll slip again or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I wonder maybe that was part of it. There's clearly indications of abuse in her past. She makes these extremely disturbing dolls that Joe, in a very loving way, has his deputies basically arranged to be bought by various people, and then he pays them. But they're fucking horrifying.
They're super creepy. And that's another way you know that Joe really loves her, because he talks to her with nothing but positivity about her artwork. He loves it. He's up on every new piece she makes. He's very proud of that. But she's hard to love. This is a very closed off person. She's not just sullen, but she's like spooky. Like you said in that scene where she's like, she's talking in the third person, right? She goes, she mustn't be stressed or I'll slip. Like she keeps slipping back and forth between referring to herself as she, which I guess maybe she's quoting somebody talking about her. But
I mean, abuse victims can disassociate too, I guess, maybe as a way of coping.
It could be that. And it's all very subtle. And also the cinematography plays a part because she's in shadow for so much of her time on screen.
You really don't see her face clearly very often in this movie at all.
You can hardly see her face. So she is spooky as hell. And Emma Stone is doing a wonderful job because she's still somehow, just with her eyes in these scenes, manages to communicate so much emotional power. It's really cool.
When I saw this in the theaters, I went through this exact sequence of events several times. Like, is that fucking Emma Stone? No, I don't think that's her. Oh, no, maybe? No. And then the credits came. I was like, oh, yeah, it was Emma Stone. But I said it to you, and maybe I'm alone here, but I don't even think she looks like herself in this. But there's no obvious prosthetics, or maybe just, I don't know what it is. She just doesn't look like Emma Stone to me in this movie.
Yeah, part of it's just she's not wearing her signature Emma Stone eyeliner, which she wears in Hollywood appearances and in her more glamorous roles. It's a very unglamorous role.
I wonder if she's wearing it in her final appearance. We should go back and check.
Oh, yeah. I think she's wearing makeup in that final. And she's tattooed as hell. She goes through quite a change, too. But yeah, she does look different. And maybe a lot of that's just her act. Like she sounds different.
She's smiling.
It's a strong performance.
And what brings on her transformation is Austin Butler himself. Don't say that he's stuck as Elvis. Don't ever say he's stuck as Elvis on the internet. You're not allowed to say that. Austin Butler's got shooters. But Elvis himself is in this movie. It's like when he appears, you're like, this fucking guy too? How many stars can they cram into this movie?
I think in light of Elvis was a good choice because, for an actor, you get the part of a traveling charismatic cult leader. The temptation to put on some kind of Southern accent must be very strong because that's like the stereotype of that character. And he doesn't. He's a California kid.
How you doing, Sheriff Joe? No, he can talk in a normal voice now. He's okay.
None of that. He talked in a totally normal voice. And he was compelling. And also like a fairly minor character for an actor like Austin Butler, who seems to be ascending very quickly in Hollywood. It was cool to see him play this little role because he's quite good in it.
Yeah, you're immediately suspicious of him because at this point, I feel like most people are probably still more or less on Sheriff Joe's side, and you can feel this guy's influence creeping over Louise immediately. But I think his character also says something important about Dawn, Louise's mom, who is the one that kind of brings her out of the house to go see his appearance. And we could see that she's been like Googling him. She's immediately put off by him and walks out of their meeting and is very upset. And I think that speaks to something about the internet versus real life. And these people you see through a screen are maybe not what you actually need to be interacting with.
Yeah, it's an interesting case for Dawn because, she loves conspiracy theories and loves to spew them. And then she brings this guy home and into Louise's life, and he digs up the one conspiracy theory that she wants to never talk about, which is, did her husband molest her daughter? And Vernon is all about that because his whole thing is about discovering that he was the victim of this really insane-sounding group pedophilia cult that stripped children naked and chased them through the woods. And Sheriff Joe's dubious about it. And as a viewer, you're dubious about it because it sounds outlandish. But
Joe also seems to catch him in a lie about it at one point. But he's very good at deflecting and making Joe feel like an asshole for even questioning it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But surely nothing like that would happen in real life. What are they going to go to an island and just hunt kids?
Jeez.
Rich people with islands. Oh boy.
There's some dark threads in this movie all throughout that are tied into our reality today in ways that you hate to think about.
Not the least of which is just the data center plotline. I feel like when this movie was in production, that was nowhere near as big of a topic as it is right now.
Yeah.
There was a lot of prescience on Aster's part to see that was going to be a huge issue in the coming years.
Yeah, it feels like he was ahead of the curve on that because that seems like topical within 3 months. The idea has now become fully mainstream that like AI is oversold. It's building out stuff that is insupportable in terms of the infrastructure. And these poor people of Eddington had already realized that back in 2020.
Yeah, I feel like even when I saw this in theaters, it wasn't as mainstream an issue as by the time it hit streaming and everybody was talking about that aspect of it. Yeah, just impressive stuff. I can't remember who it was that said people think it's prescience, but it's not hard to see where the world's going if you pay attention.
Yeah.
And that was another movie director, I think, that said that. I don't think it was Aster, but it was somebody, one of his contemporaries, and I can't remember the context of it.
I can't either, but I know it came up on the show before, and it's true. The best directors seem to be able to tap into things that become more relevant over the course of their movies getting to the screen.
But Joe doesn't police Eddington by himself, does he? He's got some help.
He almost does. As the mayor points out, he lost a bunch of deputies to a bunch of reasons that make Joe look bad as a leader, but he's got two left, Guy and Mike.
I like that one of them died of a fentanyl overdose, and he's like, from handling fentanyl, which is just such a tired, like, boomer conservative talking point that's been disproven time and again.
Yeah, that's one of the dark jokes that they throw at you.
So there's 3 of these guys, and they all work simultaneously? Like, how do the shifts work?
They all work 24-hour shifts, yeah. There's no dispatcher, there's nobody. It's an unrealistic sheriff's department. But you have to swallow that for movie reasons and go with it.
I guess there's some logic to it if he just recently lost all these other deputies. Maybe he had 5 or 6 guys at one point and that you could parcel out shifts. But yeah, they all just have to be, if they're not in the station, they got to have their phones on them 24/7 because if shit happens. I'm guessing Eddington is not a hotbed of action most of the time, but they are woefully unprepared for where the movie goes.
But it's interesting, and it feeds into they're constantly calling each other, texting each other, posting stuff, looking at each other's posts. They're very connected in the contemporary way.
They all seem like friends. They get along. We've got Mike, the younger cop, youngest of the 3, I would gather, or sheriff's deputy, played by Michael Ward. And he seems pretty competent, pretty smart. Unfortunately, loves crypto and Bitcoin. That seems to be his big Achilles heel.
That's his one thing. He's like randomly trying to insert crypto messages into Joe's campaign just because that's his hobby horse.
Yeah, Joe's like, we got to take the power back for the people. He's like, yeah, and get him on the blockchain.
Yeah, that was good comedy.
And then Luke Grimes' Guy. I'm torn on him him because I want to call him like the dummy, but he's probably smarter than Joe based on some evidence we get, but not smart by any means.
He's the one, because he's a minor character, they get to go a little bit broader with him, paint him with some conservative oafish stereotypes. You know, he consistently, when he refers to it, says Black's Lives Matter.
Jeez, I didn't even pick up on that.
And he's the one who gets super geared up in riot gear when he goes out to treat this very minor
teenagers,
demonstration by teenagers. So he represents the more cartoonish version of conservative caricature.
I felt like my blood rising at times. He'd be like, what good is destroying your own community is going to do? I was like, I'm so sick of hearing this. But
had
like,
all the talking points.
Aster, clearly a student of the internet. Like, he'd been on Twitter during the George Floyd days, or he wouldn't have all that insight.
Oh, yeah. I heard him in an interview saying exactly that. He was there scrolling Twitter, and the way that drove him crazy felt like something that he needed to put into his movie.
We can certainly relate.
Yeah.
And then the other major character in this movie is COVID-19. It's a bit of a specter in the first portion of the movie. Nobody's sick as far as we could tell. There's no major incidents about it, except one's around trying to prevent it, like we mentioned with Joe in the grocery store, or when the Pueblo native police chastise him for not wearing a mask on their land. And his argument is, it's not your land. But that was an interesting and at times painful part of the movie, was reliving COVID-19 so soon after. And I don't want to say it's gone. It's obviously not gone. People still get COVID every day. People still die of it every day. But it's certainly diminished, at least in the eyes of the media.
It was weird because it's not that long ago. We all experienced it. But some of this things seemed almost alien to me at this point. Seeing the people lining up outside the store 6 feet apart in a line. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a thing. And we just all did that. But it seems so weird now, just even seeing it on screen.
Yeah, I remember the first time I met up with some friends. We were like, let's go out drinking. We haven't gone out. And I was in Beacon, New York, which is a very cool, very hip town in upstate New York, like in the Hudson Valley area. A lot of great bars, a lot of great beer. So we were like, yeah, we were going to a drive-in movie that night, because that was the thing that came back big time during COVID, because you could stay in your car with the windows up and you didn't have to expose yourself to anyone. But every bar just had the most haphazard outdoor setup that they clearly like threw together, like which bartender owns a patio table that we could just throw on the sidewalk. No consideration given to like shade. We were basically chased by wasps from bar to bar in Beacon, New York. And like, I was like, man, we were so unprepared for this. Like, that's my core memory of COVID, for better or worse. It's just like nobody was prepared and nobody took the time to get prepared after it was on the streets.
And we've had a few bits of popular media go back to that era, but it's kind of bold even for Aster to decide to make a movie that's going to rub people's faces in it. And just that unwillingness to go back there may have played a role in its lack of box office.
Yeah, I think the movie works technically if you just take it out, but it would be missing something important.
It's so layered. There's so many things going on at the same time, and it reflects multiple things going on at the same time in America. The Black Lives Matter movement and the COVID pandemic going on at the same time is overwhelming for everybody in the country, and it's really interesting to see how both those things come to a head in Eddington in the course of this movie.
I will say that when Aster started making this movie, he probably did not expect present day to make COVID feel almost quaint in comparison to like the horrors.
That's true.
I don't want to say I long for those days because it was obviously horrifying in a lot of ways, but it didn't feel like somebody was doing it to you willingly.
Yeah.
Which is a major difference from the way things are going now.
Yeah.
Should we get into Act 2?
Yeah, let's not get stuck there. Why don't you tell us what happens next?
All right. While the sheriff and mayor have been beefing, the young people of Eddington have developed their own drama. Immersed in social media, the kids have become engrossed in concepts of racial justice and allyship. They hold Black Lives Matter protests that block Eddington streets, raising tensions with the cops and the community. Mayor Ted's son, Eric, played by Matt Gomez-Hidaka, loves to flaunt the rules on congregating, and he spars with the sheriff anytime they meet on the streets. Eric's friend, Brian, played by Cameron Mann, joins in with the local demonstrations, largely just to fit in, but also to get closer to a girl he likes named Sarah, played by Emily Hoferly. Ironically, Sarah isn't into Brian, she's into Eric. Sarah once dated the town's only African-American deputy, Michael, played by Michael Ward, and she now pleads unsuccessfully with Michael to join their cause. Elsewhere, an increasingly frazzled Sheriff Joe shows up at a campaign rally, where he records a live video accusing Mayor Ted of assaulting Louise when she was a teen. Seeing the video online, Louise posts a video of her own, refuting her husband's claim. That night, she packs her suitcase and leaves Joe's house, driving off with the cult leader, Vernon. The next day, Sheriff Joe is at a breaking point when he responds to a noise complaint at the mayor's house, where Ted is holding a fundraiser. Joe marches in and shuts off the music, which leads to a confrontation in which Mayor Ted slaps Joe in the face. Twice. Joe marches back out without a word. That evening, the sheriff sees the vagrant Lodge breaking into the mayor's bar and shoots Lodge dead in cold blood. He wraps the body in plastic and dumps it in a river outside of town. Later the same night, as Mayor Ted sits in his living room talking to his son, more shots ring out. Ted and Eric are both killed by a sniper's bullets. That sniper is Sheriff Joe. Confirming his victims are dead, Joe comes into the house, steals the mayor's engraved pocket watch, and spray paints "No Justice, No Peace" on the living room wall to throw off suspicion. The next day, as Sheriff Joe holds a press conference and blames the murders on Antifa, a group of heavily armed Antifa-themed operatives make their way towards Eddington on a mysterious private jet.
Really gets wild there.
Yeah, the second act is where the movie picks up. If your handwriting is as distinctive as Sheriff Joe's is, you got to use a stencil if you're going to spray paint some shit on the wall, right? But that will come up again later. So this is where the both sides of the movie's characters, I think the argument originates in this act. This is where we start to see more of the teens and their, some would say, performative allyship. And they are being mocked, to be clear. Aster doesn't seem to feel they're doing anything effective or beneficial, really. But I think when you contrast it with what else is going on in the town, it's pretty clear who the villains are.
Yeah, it's definitely mocking. They're saying stuff that makes you laugh when you hear it coming out of their mouths. But I think it also works as just realistic portrayal. Young people get over enthusiastic and get wildly consumed with stuff like that for good reasons, with good intentions. And so I would say that it's not that he's mocking these characters and saying, oh, look, they're wrong, they're confused, they're bad people. They're just showing the weaknesses and the foibles of young people as they really exist. So it can be funny even as their causes are just and their feelings are earnest.
One of my favorite dialogues is in this section of the movie where Sarah says to Brian, she goes, well, I just wanted to say, like, you said you were anti-racist and you actually can't be anti-racist. Like, at best, we're white critical.
Yeah.
Like, we might be white traitors. Maybe someday the goal is to be white abolitionists. And then it cuts to him repeating this to his dad, who is very conservative coded, let's say, based on the decor in his home, who shuts that down in a very abrupt way. But I think even the dad's reaction, like, it's rooted in fear of what his son is saying and why he's saying these things. You know, like, it is funny. It is played for laughs. But I think Aster is trying to say something about the older generation's resistance to seeing their kids take up these mantles.
Yeah. And Brian in particular starts with no politics, and he's entirely driven by liking a girl, which is very relatable. And it drives him to both extremes within the course of the movie, from being this ultra aggressive leftist to becoming a hero of the right and a Second Amendment rights activist.
Clearly Kyle Rittenhouse coded.
Yeah, he becomes a super smarmy influencer. And so, yeah, he's shown in the end to have weaker character. But even in the middle of that, it's like, that's what Romeo and Juliet's about, right? It's this young kid who, like, goes nuts over a girl that he doesn't have a right to be, you know, killing himself over. So it's the same lesson that Shakespeare was trying to teach us about young people's passions.
And I do have the quote from Aster that I wanted to say here that was in response to some of the criticisms leveled at the movie, which was, sure, on one side you have people who are hypocritical and annoying and maybe less sincere than they purport to be. And on another side, you have people who are ruining and destroying lives. Pretty clear what he's getting at there. But I do think the response to this movie, and maybe he was trying to draw this out to some extent, is a good encapsulation of the different standards that people are held to. You know, like, what's the phrase everyone always says? So what about the tolerant left if they're, say, something mean about somebody who's rounding up immigrants and shipping them to a country they're not even from and violating their civil rights? But if you call them a fucking piece of shit for that, oh, what happened to the tolerant left? Like, this difference in expectations and standards for the two sides. I do think people are telling on themselves a little bit when they say this movie is both sidesy for that reason.
Yeah, it's a valid strategy to feel safer mocking the side that you're sympathetic with and having a good laugh at their excesses, versus if you mock the side that you're actually ideologically against in a cheap way, then that cheapens your attack. So he makes Sheriff Joe sympathetic in ways that, like, draw you in and make you ask questions until the man cracks in a very horror movie kind of way after his wife walks out and he's publicly humiliated.
Yeah, it doesn't help that when he walks into Mayor Ted's fundraiser, his wife's video that she made basically saying my husband made all that up and none of it's true is playing on a big screen TV and seems to be piped through some kind of sound system.
It's loud.
It's not a regular flat screen speaker to be playing over the dulcet tones of Katy Perry singing Firework.
It's a funny scene, but it's very painful. The way Aster set that up and created that tension, like, you know that this man just hit a turning point, a really scary turning point when he's slapped by Pedro Pascal in this very humiliating way. It's not a manly fist fight that they get into. He just stands there while he slaps his glasses sideways twice. It's like a real oh shit moment, and it's really well executed on screen.
And then he leaves there and he's driving the streets of Eddington. It's unclear if he has a destination in mind, but he's driving the wrong way down a one-way street and somebody yells at him from a passing car, "You're going the wrong way," which feels like a real on-the-nose kind of screenwriting thing where Aster's saying, like, this is the moment where he's made a decision to embrace the darkness.
He's definitely set on the wrong path there. And then it's interesting because the first victim of his bottled up rage is Lodge. And as you mentioned, he kills him in the mayor's bar. I was expecting that Joe was going to concoct some kind of scheme to get back at the mayor by...
He's not great. He's not great at those.
He's not that great at scheming. He's good at shooting a gun. But yeah, like...
Yes, they do establish that in the first act, that he's a crack shot, like award-winning marksman.
And it's another good aspect to that character. But yeah, what did you make of it when he kills Lodge? Because I know that Lodge is super annoying and almost intolerable in the fact that he's always screaming in your face and causing havoc. And in this case, he's smashing up this establishment, which Joe probably wouldn't care that much about the mayor's bar getting smashed up. But that's where he first loses it and goes from very angry to an actual murderer.
Yeah, so the question of why he decides to shoot Lodge is one that the movie does not spoon feed us, and we kind of have to draw our own conclusions about. Part of it could be, how aware is Joe that he probably has COVID at this point, and he probably got it from Lodge? So there could be some anger at that. He's obviously just also at his breaking point with his wife leaving him for this young, handsome cult leader, this younger, handsomer mayor slapping him around in public and humiliating him. And that scene at the town hall he tries to do at that Mexican restaurant is so painful because he seems to know he's doing the wrong thing when he starts that speech. He's like, he's a predator. Let's just say it. Statutory. Like, he's trying to like get the gumption to just call this guy a rapist, but he doesn't want to because he knows that's a point of no return.
Yeah.
But he eventually does, and it causes his whole breakdown.
Yeah, he talks himself, and it's interesting because this character has now this recognizable pattern that we've seen because he's talked himself up into running for mayor on the spur of the moment, and then he talked himself into accusing the mayor of being a literal rapist on camera. And then that second time, Deputy Guy is like, are you sure I should post that? And he's like, don't question me, just get it out there before I change my mind. So he knows this about himself, that he's got this weakness and this impulsiveness, and it's his undoing.
So Lodge gets shot, and then we pretty much immediately cut to the Garcia household where Mayor Ted gets shot, but also Eric gets shot. And that felt like a really big turning point for Joe's character because this is a kid he's had run-ins with in the past, sure, but he's still a child. And it's even more horrifying because Eric realizes what's happening at some point and tries to run away and is not able to get out of the way in time. I don't think he would have been redeemable, so to speak, if he'd spared Eric, but this just pushes him even further down the road from redemption.
Yeah, that for me is where the movie went full horror or sort of thriller horror, because that scene is so beautifully choreographed. It's so upsetting.
Oh, yeah.
To see Ted sitting in his living room, and then the way he designed this shot where the sheriff is on a hillside far away, but he's in the distance, so you see the muzzle flash in the distance through the glass door, and then a moment later, the door shatters and Ted's chest erupts with a bullet wound. That was just striking. The audio of it, the way it plays out on screen, and then the way, like you said, when the son realizes what's going on and tries to run away and catches that other bullet and crashes through another door. It's rough stuff. It's quite affecting.
You called out just how artistic that sequence was, and it is really striking. I went back and rewatched it after I saw your note. Just, yeah, you do see the muzzle flash in the distance. It's really well done. But like many Aster sequences, it's well done and horrifying.
Yeah, that's where I realized I'm like, oh, okay, I'm in good hands. This is turning into a horror movie. It's becoming over the top, grisly, viscerally horrifying. And after that, it gets nuttier from there.
We check in with Antifa. What are they up to? They're on a private jet. Who rented that for them? Was it Mr. Soros?
It could have been. Is his logo a globe with a hand grasping it? Did you see that on the tail of the private jet that they're on? There's a little logo.
I didn't clock that. I'm going to have to look that up now. Maybe it is. I don't know. Does George Soros have a logo?
I don't think so. I don't think so. This is where it gets larger than life because all of a sudden you're like, we're based in Eddington. Why are we watching like a Learjet flying through the air? And then the camera moves up the aisle. So you don't see anybody's faces, but you can almost see the guys and they're all in commando gear and black sweaters and watch caps.
Is there, what, 3 of them?
There's at least 3. Yeah, I think we clearly can see 3. I forgot if we could actually count more in the final fight. It feels like he kills a lot of guys to get through the end of the movie, but it's a tight squad of commandos, and they're loading their magazines. They have quite a lot of equipment and a lot of really stereotypical, over-the-top racial justice slogans on their banners and patches that are on the plane with them.
The private jet and the kind of ideas on the signs were the first major indicators to me that we are not supposed to take these these guys at their word that they are Antifa there to enact social justice on Eddington.
It took me longer because I was in a different mode. I was thinking I was watching a movie where there may be like a wish fulfillment, like a revenge fantasy where there was suddenly super empowered Black characters that you didn't know existed that would now come and set things right in the town. But they're definitely not there to set things right. They're there to make things much, much more wrong. And one of the hints is that you can tell that they're all white men on this plane if you will look closely, but I was distracted by the signs and the camera moves, and I didn't catch that until later when it brings it home.
And one of them, presumably the guy who gets the most screen time, even though he's wearing a ski mask, but the guy who has the final showdown with Sheriff Joe, is Keith Jardine, the Dean of Mean.
The Dean of Mean, an old favorite of ours back from UFC days.
Yeah, and we've talked about him on the podcast before because he had another showdown with Joaquin Phoenix in PTA's Inherent Vice.
Yes, we really loved that moment. We talked a lot about it because that's where that hero became super competent and despite being drugged by this scary guy, works his way out of this deadly situation and turns the tables.
Yeah, I think Jardine, he's just got a great look for like a goon or a henchman type of guy. He's very stereotypically intimidating looking, and he keeps popping up. I think he lives in Albuquerque, so I remember seeing him in Breaking Bad, popping up and stuff, filmed in the area. Maybe he'll be on Pluribus, who knows? But
he might.
This was obviously also filmed in New Mexico. Makes sense, but just a cool little tidbit. You wouldn't know it was him, but we went through the cast list. Actually, you called it out and said, I think that's Keith Jardine.
You can tell just before his head explodes. Spoiler alert, but I was like, that's Keith Whoops. Okay, that was Keith Jardine.
He does a hammer fist downwards, except he's got a knife in his hand. All right, you ready to take us home?
Yeah, let's head home. As Sheriff Joe works on his sham investigation to find the mayor's killer, Officer Butterfly Jimenez, played by William Bello of the neighboring Pueblo Tribal Police, becomes a thorn in Joe's side. As Jimenez finds more and more clues pointing to Joe, the sheriff is busy interrogating the young protesters. But things take a dramatic turn when the cops suddenly find the mayor's pocket watch in Deputy Michael's squad car. The sheriff arrests the incredulous Michael and locks him in the station's holding cell. Then, suspecting that Jimenez is onto him, Joe drives off to follow the Pueblo cop, but he's soon called back to the station to find that things have gone haywire. The so-called Antifa commandos distracted Deputy Guy with a dumpster fire and meanwhile broke Michael out of his jail cell. As night falls and Joe's health declines into fever and hacking cough, Joe and Guy find Michael seemingly alone in the desert. But as they approach, the nearby operatives detonate an explosion that kills Guy and wounds Michael badly. What follows is a chaotic roaming gunfight as the Antifa false flag agitators hunt down Joe right through the center of town. Somehow, Joe kills them all, except for the last commando who runs up and stabs straight down into Joe's skull with a knife. But the severely wounded sheriff is then saved by the appearance of young Brian, who live streams himself as he manages to shoot and kill the last attacker. Now, it's 1 year later. Brian has become a famous right-wing influencer. A severely disabled Joe has been elected mayor, but it's his mother-in-law, Dawn, who cares for him and has become the true power broker in town. As they live together in the luxurious new mansion paid for by the backers of the new data center, poor old brain-damaged Joe must sit and watch as Dawn shows him a new video from Vernon Maxwell Peak. Joe cries as he sees Louise sitting on a stage next to Vernon, beaming up at him as she cradles the child she carries in her belly.
What an ending. But before we get there, we get our biggest, most of the time we get to spend with Officer Butterfly is in this section of the movie. And I grew to really like him. I think we're supposed to. He's just like a competent officer. Like he's pretty incredulous at how bad the other guys are at their jobs when they're canvassing the scene at the mayor's house and just like completely fucking it all up, ruining the evidence.
Spoiling the evidence.
One of them says, this is our crime scene. He goes, it's your fucking toilet now.
Yeah, he's like, all this is going to get thrown out.
But then he also immediately catches on to the fact that somebody in the sheriff's office did it. I didn't know if he was certain it was Joe because I guess anybody could have written that message on the whiteboard, but he definitely recognizes the handwriting on the whiteboard as the same that's on Mayor Ted's wall.
Yeah, and any decent cop would realize how much motivation Joe had. And then when you find a shell casing that Joe was otherwise a pretty competent tactical operator, we talked about how good he is as a shot, and he planned out that murder pretty well. He had tried to pick up his shell casings. He just missed one that he accidentally stepped on while he was picking up the others and forgot that he had fired a third bullet that went wide into the wall. And he thought ahead enough to bring booties when he walked into the house to spray paint his meshes so he wouldn't leave tracks behind.
But he left tire tracks behind, unfortunately.
He left tire tracks. He left just enough.
On Pueblo ground, yeah.
Yeah, and they had just jurisdicts in there. And yeah, Butterfly is just a good cop, a compelling guy, and he's right away. He does not hesitate. He's like onto him and like unafraid of making it clear that he's like sniffing around, like he's taking pictures.
Well, there's such a dick to him that like, why would he care about antagonizing them?
Yeah, they're very antagonistic in a fun way. But like he's tailing the sheriff. As soon as the sheriff parks at the station and goes inside, Butterfly's outside taking pictures of the sheriff's tire treads because he knows he's got a tire track and he's trying to match it up. He could have done that on the other side of the car and not be seen, but he's basically taunting the sheriff by pursuing him pretty publicly.
But then the Michael setup starts happening. I guess everybody's distracted by all the mounting evidence pointing towards Michael. This is like a weird pet peeve, not a pet peeve of mine, but almost like a phobia, is I hate seeing people being framed for stuff.
Yeah.
Like it makes me so anxious. It's one of my least, it's almost up there with the parts in musicals where they start almost singing when they're talking to each other. They're about to start singing. That's my least favorite part in a movie. This is like a second, but not because it's poorly done or anything. It's just like an anxiety inducing thing for me.
Oh yeah, it very much is. Michael Ward, who plays Michael, plays this great. Like when this is happening, when a guy's being unfairly accused, but there is evidence, you want those gut reactions to feel really real, like an innocent guy going, what's happening? Why are you doing this? And he plays that perfectly, which helps with it being really infuriating and anxiety inducing.
And he's tuned in enough when he gets his one phone call and he calls a family member. He tells him, like, I'm being framed. I'm being set up.
Yeah.
Like he knows exactly what's happening. He doesn't know why or by who. I think he still looks up to Sheriff Joe. So he probably hasn't even entertained the possibility that he's the one who killed these people and is trying to cover his own ass. And then when we see Michael at the end, there's a grimness to him, not just because he's injured now, but like the way he goes about his target practice. I think like he's been jaded. The movie leaves him in an ambiguous spot. He's theoretically the sheriff, I guess we have to assume by then. He's the only cop we recognize, but he seems to maybe have a vendetta against Solid Gold Magikarp.
Yeah, I think he might be the sheriff. He's got 4 stars on his collar. I noticed that this time. So he was definitely promoted. And what a great character for a sequel like that guy. We know his whole backstory. He saw the Antifa agitators from the inside, right? Like they kidnapped him and took him and staged him in this place where they told him if he talks or moves, they'll shoot him. And he had to lure his colleagues into this ambush. So he's been through the shit. And it's not clear what sort of opinion he came away with, except for a deep bitterness.
I feel like Joe and Guy need to watch more movies because when your friend and coworker is standing conspicuously still and won't talk to you or move his arms in any way, you gotta be like, oh, they've propped him up somehow. This is a trap, but they just wade into it. I do love that Joe is a bit cowardly in this moment, makes Guy step forward and actually do the dirty work, which gets him blown all to shit.
I've got cover. You go ahead. And he gets blown into pieces. Like his arm lands in one spot and Joe goes over and retrieves his gun from his hand so he can use it to keep fighting the bad guys.
I love the shot of Joe like waking up and pointing his gun, and then he looks down and realizes his gun got blown out of his hand. But then that's another good, much like the sniper shot we see from the distance with the use of sound. Joe's temporarily deaf from the explosion, and that just like putting us in his shoes with the way the sound is designed in this sequence is super effective at making us feel disoriented and scared. So when Joe starts shooting at these guys and they start return fire, he's just woefully unprepared for it and does not really know what to do.
He's out of it, but that kind of makes him a sympathetic, quote unquote, hero for the story, because despite all that, he's still this really good shot with a gun, which is what you want from your sheriff in a Western, right? So even though he's just been nearly blown to shit and he can't hear and he's totally dazed and he's racked with COVID, he notices the guy operating the camera drone that's recording this staged scene for their propaganda. And from quite a distance with his pistol starts taking shots at the guy and forces him out of there, forces him to drop his phone, which helps him put the pieces together about what's going on with these guys. And then he ends up taking it to them on the streets of Eddington.
Yeah, some really funny moments in this gunfight in the streets of Eddington. Also, some really scary stuff. I did love this white guy falling through the roof of the Native American Museum onto the Geronimo exhibit. Seems to be a bit of commentary there.
Yeah.
But then he manages to get next door into the gun shop. And when he comes guns blazing out of the gun shop with this ludicrous machine gun, I thought that was a pretty funny shot because he's shooting at no one in particular at first.
It's wild. It's definitely Rambo-style action. That whole scene from the explosion through the end of the running gunfight was a big, long scene. It's wonderfully shot and executed and choreographed, including that great stunt where he falls through the roof, which looks really painful. And then it has painful symbolism layered on top of that. And there's funny moments and there's truly scary moments of him just wondering where the last guy is, him spinning around on the darkened, lonely street and the camera spinning around opposite him. And it's really tense and terrifying. It's quite a good action scene. Really good stuff.
Yeah. And then tragically, he does accidentally. It does seem like a real accident when he shoots Butterfly, but I'm sure he didn't mind considering Butterfly was starting to catch on to him. But then Antifa finishes Butterfly off, blowing the top of his head clean off. Joe gets stabbed in such a silly way. Like, it's horrifying, obviously, but what a weird way to stab somebody. Top of the head?
Yeah, that a guy that Keith Jardine would just run up to you, charge you because your gun ran out of bullets, and so did his. And so he just runs up, and he doesn't shove him down. He doesn't stab him in the throat. He goes top down through the top of the head, which is, to me, just makes it more of a horror movie. Like, it's almost this 80s action movie for a while, and it's this great heat-style machine guns in the street thriller. thriller shootout scene, and then it ends with a really grotesque horror movie stab through the top of the head move.
He gets him twice, right? I think he takes it out once and does it again.
He takes it out and hits him again somewhere. I was like, I couldn't be sure if he gets 2 stabs through the brain or if the second shot was just like a blow to the head to knock him down.
And then Brian to the rescue. Brian misses him like 8 times.
Because he's busy holding up his phone, so he gets it on camera.
That's like the iconic shot from this movie, I think, is like Brian holding his phone out to record him shooting a gun at a guy. But I did love the montage of Brian with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And now he lives in Florida. Like he's going through the whole playbook of Rittenhouse. I think most movies would end there, but this one doesn't.
No.
We get the very, at times, funny, but really painful and sad sequence of Joe and his current life.
Yeah, there's not much left to the guy. He's lost most of his capacity for moving himself. He's obviously still capable of understanding stuff because Don forces him to understand what's become of his wife.
Why? I don't, because she does seem to be like fond of him still to some degree. She's not torturing him as far as I could tell.
No.
Like, why would she sleep in the bed with him if he was just her prisoner, essentially?
So we left that out of the synopsis. We should explain. There's this whole thing where all of a sudden you see Dawn speaking on behalf of the mayor. She's wearing a pantsuit. She's become very buttoned up corporate power broker because the data center people have funded her, and now she and Joe are in their pocket, and she's responsible for taking care of Joe, but she got this nice house out of it. He's got this caregiver.
It's a nice house. I like the house a lot.
It's a super nice, and his old house was run down, so this definitely stands out as though they've changed their situation in the world. But he can't enjoy it. He's a ruined man, both physically and emotionally. And she's not only benefited from riding his coattails, because he's the mayor, but she does all the speaking for him because he can't even talk. But she's got this orderly or health aide that helps drive him around and uses a lift to get out of his chair and into the bed. And then we find that she's sleeping with the caregiver, and they're all 3 of them in the same bed. And
Joe's in the middle.
No, but he takes up more than, he's on one side, but he takes up more than half.
Okay.
Yeah, because the caregiver guy comes and snuggles with her, but they've got one half of the king bed and he's got the other half because he's got so many big pillows that have to prop him up. But it makes sense. I thought about that too. I was like, why don't they just at least do the decency of sleeping together in private? But the thing is, the guy needs round the clock care. So his caregiver can't sleep in a different room than him.
Yeah.
Like it's his job to be there when Joe wakes up. So they have to have their affair in front of Joe because they don't give a shit.
I guess it's not an affair. It's maybe morally questionable.
Yeah.
But then there's also a scene where like the health aide is like helping Joe get on the toilet and Joe's kind of resisting and he just like smacks him really hard in the back of the head.
Yeah.
And it's just so degrading. But then he also like apologizes and kind of like pets him like a dog. Like it's just, the whole sequence is drawn out to make us like maximum pity for this.
It is very sad. It's very upsetting but also very real. That idea of a caregiver abusing somebody in that situation because they've lost their cool with this person who has also lost their cool because their situation is so miserable. It's just a fucking stew of misery, and it's tough.
But then the actual final shot of the movie is the data center lit up in the middle of the desert, dwarfing the town of Eddington. And when you look at the timeline of events, it becomes pretty clear what actually happened in that last sequence. As soon as the mayor, who was sympathetic to the data center getting built, gets killed, and his only opponent in the mayoral race is an outspoken critic of the data center getting built, suddenly there's murderous assassins in Eddington targeting the new mayor, essentially.
Yeah.
Not hard to put that together. But at first watch, it's disorienting. But once you take a step back and look at it in that sense, it makes a lot of sense.
It works out for everybody. The thing is, they were not just data center commandos, because we see from the videos on their phone that they were also the same group that was responsible for attacking a police station in Portland. We see that footage on the news, and then we see it on their phone. So they're all-purpose sort of agent provocateurs employed by the right to exaggerate the violence of the left for whatever crackdowns they need to employ. In this case, the crackdown helped Solid Gold Magikarp get their data center built.
Solid Gold Magikarp itself is a real term used in AI. It's a phenomenon in AI where certain prompts exhibit unusual and often nonsensical behavior when processed by the model. And Solid Gold Magikarp is one of those prompts that kind of makes AI models go haywire. It stems from initial data collection, which seems trivial at first. By continuously identifying and reinforcing it, the effect becomes amplified and real.
Interesting.
Which I'm not really sure what that means functionally for an AI model, but I bet Ari Aster does.
But it does sound fanciful. Magikarp is like a Pokemon, right?
Yeah, he becomes Gyarados, one of the most powerful Pokemon of the original group, but he's just a little stupid fish. He sucks, but he turns into something super strong.
Okay, so it's humorous that name. It's cute and twee and Pokemon derived. Yeah. I love that phrase. I love that it has actual meaning in the AI world, but I love that it just sounds like a ridiculous ass name for a data center.
Right, but like knowing tech dudes and how fucking dorky they are, it does also feel like a real life thing that would happen.
Exactly, ridiculous, but also plausible at the same time.
I remember watching the documentary on Enron, and one of their Andy something was one of the architects of that whole debacle. And he had all these shell companies and they all had those type of names. Like they were all based on sci-fi stuff. So it feels true to life.
Totally.
But that's Eddington. There's not a ton of catching up with Ari Aster to do. I kind of went over it in the monologue. We know all the movies he's made. I would say to anyone listening, if you want to be super duper uncomfortable and upset for a long time, to check out his short film, The Strange Thing About the Johnsons.
Ooh, okay. I think you told me about that before, and I was too freaked out to even try.
Yeah, it used to be available on YouTube. I don't know if it still is. Yep, it still is in full. You can just watch the whole thing on YouTube. It's not long. It's 18 minutes or something like that. But it really gives you a glimpse into how much more fucked up this movie could have been, because that is one fucked up movie. But yeah, we don't know exactly what he's doing right now. He was talking about an Eddington sequel even after this hit theaters. So he already knew that the commercial prospects of the movie were not looking great.
Oh, okay.
It does seem to be popular on streaming, though. Like I think a lot of people have discovered it in the last few months. But he also said he's looking for a return to horror, maybe, and a sci-fi adaptation specifically that he has in mind for his next movie. At this point, I'll pretty much watch whatever he does. I might even give Beau is Afraid a chance. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm curious now to go back to that. Just having a better feel for where the director might be leading you in that might make it easier to swallow versus if you're just thrown into this world and anything horrible can happen at any moment. That's the fear, is the unknown for me. So
yeah,
maybe I'll be able to take it.
You want to hear about Joaquin, what he's been up to?
Yeah, what's he doing?
He has not had a profitable wide release movie since 2019's Joker. Movies he's made since then were Beau is Afraid, Napoleon, Joker Folie à Deux, and now Eddington, all bombs. But it's not all bad news. He will next star in Lynn Ramsey's Polaris, no relation to the Tarkovsky and Soderbergh movies. It's not a remake of those. It's its own thing.
Okay.
But then Pavel Polakowski making a movie called The Island, and it will star him and his wife, Rooney Mara.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, they're like a couple that goes to an island because they want to live in isolation, but then I think an influencer shows up and makes the island famous. They struggle to maintain their piece of paradise.
That sounds better. I was worried for a second that they were going to remake the Michael Bay Island.
We didn't hate it, but
No.
it was okay for a Michael Bay movie.
We were exhausted by several of the 30-minute chase scenes, but other than that, we liked some things about it.
Oh, wait till you see Ambulance. That's one big chase scene.
Oh, God.
But I actually like it. It's got Jake G at his most unhinged.
Yeah.
Love to see it. Let's talk about Pedro a little bit. He's been on an up and down run. He's been lauded for his performances in The Mandalorian and The Last of Us. I don't know how much time he spends in the suit as The Mandalorian. It seems like anybody could be in there and he just does the voiceover.
He's just letting the double do most of the work.
I don't know. That was a question that was raised a lot about Ethan Hawke as the grabber, Black Phone, but apparently he was on set for all. That was him in this mask.
Oh,
so
okay.
Maybe Pedro's on set every day filming it with a little puppet. Who's to say? But he will reprise both those roles. He'll be in The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is the first Star Wars movie in 7 years.
Oh, boy. Didn't realize.
And yeah, it's been since The Rise of Skywalker in 2019. And he's also slated to appear in season 3 of The Last of Us whenever that comes out. Probably be a couple of years.
Okay.
He was in Gladiator 2, which made lots of money, but had such a massive budget, it probably lost a little bit of money. But then he followed it up with The Materialists, though his performance in that has been turned into a meme, not because it's a bad performance, but because there's just one scene that's really funny and feels out of place in the movie.
I think I might have missed that meme because I don't think I know what you're talking about. Might have to look that up.
It's hard for me to think this isn't about the legs, is the line you need to remember to understand the meme.
Okay.
I watched The Materialist. It wasn't as bad as I was expecting. It
Okay.
kept my interest. The Fantastic Four opened really big, but it made just over $500 million with a $230 million budget. So with the huge marketing spend that Marvel usually gets, it probably lost some money. But he will be back as Reed Richards in Avengers Doomsday.
You can't be happy about that because you were like, he was horribly miscast as Reed Richards.
He kind of was. I think a lot of people thought that. Did you watch it yet?
No, I haven't seen it yet, so I don't have my own opinion on it, but I remember you bring that on the show. I was surprised to go, oh, you're pooping on Pedro.
Yeah, I'm not sure if John Krasinski's the answer. That was everyone's dream fan casting.
Oh, interesting.
Which I could see, but I feel like he's just not much of an actor anymore. He's more of a director now, but he'll be back. I don't know. He just didn't feel like Reed Richards to me.
Okay.
I read a decent amount of Fantastic Four as a kid, but he'll also be in Tony Gilroy's upcoming Behemoth, which just based on Tony Gilroy and the cast, which also includes David Harbour, Eva Victor, Olivia Wilde, Matthew Lillard, and Margarita LaViva. I'm very excited about.
Sounds pretty good.
Tony Gilroy, of course, of Andor fame.
Yeah.
Did you watch Andor?
I'm not caught up, but I was a big fan of season 1 and I just stalled out in season 2.
Brother. The second half of season 2 of Andor is the best shit ever.
I know. I got to do it. I got to get back on the Andor shuttle.
Emma Stone, she doesn't have anything on the horizon as far as I could tell, but she's been working a lot with Yorgos, of course. She did Poor Things and Kinds of Kindness and Begonia after this. Before that, she starred in The Curse with Nathan Fielder. I've always been meaning to check out. I hear good things about it.
Same here. And I'm more and more of an Emma fan. I'm like, it's wrong of me to not watch that and see what she did in it because I heard good things.
I don't think she can do any wrong at this point. She also, as a producer in 2024, made I Saw the TV Glow and A Real Pain, 2 movies I watched and really enjoyed both of them. Let me just double check that she doesn't have any upcoming projects. That seems like a mistake.
She must be, with her production company, they must have something that they're working towards. Maybe none of it's ready to announce.
Yeah, she's got two movies that she's credited as a producer that are upcoming, Little White Corvette and an untitled Jesse Eisenberg musical comedy, but nothing as an actor. So maybe just in the too early stages to actually put it out there.
We'll be waiting.
Anyway, I did all my housekeeping at the top of this episode, so we don't have to do that.
Okay.
We're not going to tell you what we're covering next week, but it will be a big movie from 2025. It's a movie people seem to like. We both liked it. We both already seen it.
This time it's best of year in review.
We both maybe brought it for show and tell.
Oh, maybe.
So,
that's a clue.
yeah, I'm trying to think of a clue that's not super obvious. I can't, so just tune in. You'll see.
Okay.
And that'll be in a week because we're doing it every week for January.
Yeah, we'll be right back with another movie.
In the Blast Zone. See you next time.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
Did your part.